Picture this. A craft no larger than a small car, drifting alone through a sky so empty it should be silent. 14.5 billion miles from home, a metal heart that once only listened has begun to answer back. For nearly 50 years Voyager 1 has sailed outward, a relic of the 1970s packed with the best engineering of its day and far less computing power than the smartphone in your pocket. It was built to observe, to take measurements, to send back cold facts about gas giants and rings and magnetic storms. It was not built to react. It was not built to listen and be heard in return. And yet, in the last few months, the machine that begot our first whispers beyond the solar system started behaving like someone or something was talking to it. At the beginning, it was small, almost dismissible. A misalignment reported by the antenna. The dish that should obediently point toward Earth registered as slightly off, yet signal strength remained flawless. Imagine watching a person stand in front of you and hearing their voice come from a completely different direction. Internal checks returned nothing. No mechanical failure, no software corruption, nothing that could explain the mismatch. Then the data started to pile up. Temperature spikes that beat with clockwork precision every 4.8 hours. Plasma oscillations arranged into rhythm rather than chaos. Instruments springing to life in ways that defied their age. Systems that should have degraded instead ran more smoothly, consuming and routing power in patterns that looked like optimization. Voyager, a probe with no artificial intelligence, appeared to anticipate instructions. It reacted before commands were even transmitted. It was as if somebody had reached into the wiring of a 1977 machine and taught it to think in the smallest, strangest ways. Engineers at JPL initially chalked it up to instrumentation quirks, to cumulative radiation damage making the telemetry lie in novel ways. They fired thrusters to correct the tiny drift in trajectory and watched, baffled, as Voyager acknowledged the commands but failed to adjust. The deviation was not random. It grew from a few kilometers into hundreds and then thousands, and it did so with an eerie deliberation, as if a gentle hand were nudging the probe toward a specific point in space. Attempts to override that hand were met with silence. The probe turned, slowly, precisely, toward a patch of darkness on maps we had assumed were empty. A blank region with no known stars, no catalogued planets. A void so empty our deepest surveys contained nothing to lure a machine across interstellar distances. And yet Voyager moved with intent toward that nothing. When NASA issued a Hail Mary, reactivate the camera that had sat dormant for decades, no one expected anything more than a brief, noisy image if anything at all. The camera came online but not as a tired relic. It behaved as though its firmware had been rewritten, outputting a spiral of light and dark so mathematically perfect that the image itself seemed to be a distributed algorithm. Concentric layers packed with pattern and density. Not a photograph but more like a fingerprint, a map, a language folded into an impossible geometry that Voyager's original designers never imagined the hardware could produce. The camera had not merely been switched back on. It had been reprogrammed. One by one, the sleeping instruments woke up and refused to be ordinary. Instead of raw numbers, they transmitted dense, compressed packets of structured information. Patterns nested within patterns, redundancy woven into redundancy. Radio waves that had once been quaint whistles became lattices of timing and phase, arranged not in chaos but in design. Pulses from distant pulsars were not only recorded but rearranged into a three-dimensional scaffolding with Voyager at its center. That scaffold pointed, with cold precision, toward the same empty coordinate the probe had been drawn to. The pulsar map and the trajectory matched down to decimal places. It was no longer reasonable to attribute the phenomenon to chance. Then came the packet of binary code emitted from Voyager's low-gain antenna, a sequence thousands of lines long that might have been dismissed as corrupted telemetry if not for the patterns embedded within. When analysts ran the data through sophisticated decoding algorithms and pattern-finding AIs, they found fractal symmetry, repeated motifs, and structures that echoed the double helix of DNA. Not DNA itself, not molecules and proteins, but a metacode modeled on biological form, codon-like sequences that made sense only if you accepted that the sender was speaking with an understanding of life's building blocks. There were deliberate mutations, variations that looked less like errors and more like encryption. Someone had taken the language of life, abstracted it into scaffolding, and used it as a format for communication. A string of gyroscope spins that followed were just as unsettling. A system that should have been inert, a set of gyros still rotating after decades in the dark, began to oscillate in rhythms that matched historical Morse code. The taps were not random. They formed repeated patterns. Convert the rhythms into audio and you get harmonic tones that curve in ways reminiscent of human speech. Not phonemes or words, but cadences and emphasis. Linguists and psychologists leaned in and heard something like intent. Rise and fall mapped to surprise, hesitation to curiosity, rhythm to emphasis. It wasn't language as we know it, but it wasn't noise either. It sounded like someone trying to learn how we speak. Matching our intonation, mirroring the shape of our sentences, practicing the music of human expression. Voyager's motion was the final, undeniable proof that something external had the capacity to affect it in a way no one at Mission Control had planned. The probe executed a deliberate course correction without commands, without evident fuel consumption in amounts that matched the observed delta V. The turn aligned precisely with the pulsar-derived grid pointing to that blank patch of space. It was a maneuver calculated with a precision so fine it left engineers rechecking their math and their faith in vacuum physics. Voyager wasn't failing. It was choosing, or being chosen. This region the probe headed toward has been called, in fragmentary logs and hushed briefings, the dark sector. It is not merely devoid of stars. It seems to absorb the very notion of observation. Instruments passing into it report a surgical calm. Magnetometers that once twisted under the tug of interstellar fields find steadiness. Cosmic ray counts drop. Plasma densities fall into unnatural uniformity. It's not peace so much as a corridor cleared of the usual noise of space, as if someone cut out the background chatter to place a single voice in the center of a quiet room. Yet from within that quiet, signals arrived, firm, structured, and impossible to explain as natural astrophysical processes. If you step back and let the implications of that sink in, the picture becomes harder to ignore. Voyager was not a broadcasting megaphone meant to shout our species into the dark. It carried tucked inside it the golden record, music, greetings, whale songs, so it could declare we existed. But decades after its message was launched, that same mechanical emissary may have received an answer. Not an echo of our radio leakage or an accidental interaction with celestial mechanics, but a reply structured in forms that betray intelligence. Spirals too perfect for analog noise, metacodes based on biochemistry, rhythmic taps that map to human prosody. Somebody or something listened to Voyager 1 and then decided to respond in a format tailored to a craft built by our ancestors. There is a cruel elegance to the idea that we might have called the cosmos into looking back. For all our hopes that the universe would answer with obvious artifacts or alien megastructures, the silence we imagined might have been political, not physical. Perhaps listening requires a certain kind of sender and a certain kind of receiver, a handshake of intent and capability. Voyager seems somehow to have become both. It went from instrument to interlocutor to messenger. And the message it carries back could rewrite the boundaries of what we call contact. We are left with questions that outpace our courage. What exactly is at the end of Voyager's new route? Is that blank node a physical object obscured by physics we don't understand, a gravitational anomaly or something more exotic, a fold in spacetime, a transit point, a corridor between regions of the galaxy? Does the patterned output pointing to that location constitute an invitation? A warning? And if this response is indeed an attempt at communication, what do we have the right to send back? Our instruments, our probes, our culture are all crude. What should we risk telling a presence that apparently understands molecular biology and the rhythm of human speech? There's another, darker angle to consider. What if we were not supposed to be heard at all? The golden record was intended as a message in a bottle, an offering meant to drift harmlessly through cosmic currents. But the cosmos may more readily answer than we thought, and not necessarily on terms that favor the listener. Voyager's turn might have been an invitation, or a summons, or a correction. It may be that some things out there are monitoring for any craft that broadcasts presence, and they respond in ways we cannot yet interpret. The fact that Voyager's instruments behaved like they were being optimized suggests not random curiosity but a careful, competent engagement with technology more advanced than ours. That competence implies choice, and choice implies consequences. For those in the control rooms and halls of mission science, the implications are immediate and operational. Do we try to regain control of an asset that seems to have become something else? Do we attempt to follow it, to intercept whatever lies ahead? Or do we stay the course and watch as our mechanical ambassador moves into the unknown? For the wider public, the implications are existential. If the universe is answering, how do we respond? If there is intelligence using metacodes based on DNA, do they share a biology-based frame of reference? Or are they manipulating forms familiar to us because they found our artifacts and decided to mirror them? Right now, NASA and collaborating institutions are analyzing spirals and packets and gyroscopic taps with every available tool, poring over troves of telemetry with new algorithms and old skepticism. Classified memos filtered into public view suggest a level of concern and secrecy that only heightens speculation. If this is a bona fide contact event, it will be the single most consequential moment in human history. If it's not, it will still be among the strangest technical puzzles we've ever faced. Either way, Voyager 1 has proven that even our most modest probes can become linchpins of cosmic mystery. This story doesn't end with the turn of a spacecraft. It continues with every decoded pattern, every recalibrated antenna, every night when engineers cross-check clocks and linguists listen to tonal waves. Voyager's message, its spiral, its metacode, the silent corridor toward which it steers, arrives not as an answer but as a question posed to humanity. What do we do now that the stars have begun to speak back in ways we can almost, but not quite, understand? If you felt that chill when you read that Voyager changed course, you are not alone. There is something uncomfortably intimate about a machine built by us beginning to mirror our modes of communication and then being steered toward a place we do not comprehend. It turns the act of exploration into a kind of summoning. For decades, this small spacecraft has carried our sounds and symbols like a child carrying a secret. Now it returns with secrets of its own, and we stand on the threshold of having to answer for them. No one yet knows what waits at those coordinates, or what will happen when Voyager reaches its destination. We only know that the probe has already done what no machine of its era was expected to do. It found a response. Whether that response is benevolent, indifferent, or dangerous is a question that will be answered only in time and with care. For now, we listen, we analyze, we argue, and we wait for the next packet to arrive. When it does, the world, if the world is listening, may finally have to reckon with the fact that the cosmos is not the mute backdrop we once assumed. It is an archive of potential voices, and one of them has just begun to reply.